Washington's 12-0, and they're number 3 in the AP poll now.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Rome Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Lars, as we record this on Sunday afternoon, Washington has moved up to number 3 in the latest edition of the Associated Press poll, which is really nice to see. They're only sitting behind Georgia and Michigan now. That's really nice to see that the Huskies can continue to move up. What do you think? Do you think that they deserve to be ahead of Florida State still, despite the both teams playing in tough games against less than stellar rivals?
Yeah, I mean, I believe it or not, I heard the arguments being made where it's like, how is, Florida State should move up above Washington. It's like, well, how do you put a team at 5? And again, because you're working with last week's, even though Ohio State lost, which is why they fell to 6 and why everyone is Washington moved up to 3. But how would you then have Florida State leapfrog Washington with a backup? It's like that's almost too much precedent to set after you refuse to set precedent otherwise, with Washington continue to beat top 25 teams week after week. Now, again, USC is currently not a top 25 team. Utah is not a top 25 team, but at the time they were, right? You have to judge it at the moment, right? You can't say, hey, well, now they're good. It's like, well, okay, like you can factor both in, right? You're factoring, and that's why Oregon is so hot right now, but they're not moving up above Florida State and Washington because they're both undefeated, right? So as long as you still win your games, you can't at this point get jumped. Now this is where you come into the quarterfinal matchup, if you will, where next year when they have the 12-team playoff, you're saying, okay, you're going 2-2-2 down to get to the national championship. This year, the Pac-12 championship is almost like for a right to play in the playoff, right? Because no matter what, whoever wins goes. There's no way you're not in a situation where, like, I would have a hard time seeing Oregon get left out if they beat Washington and win a Pac-12 championship, right? Like, same thing with Washington, right? Even if Washington wins by 1 point against Oregon, they're still 13-0 in the Pac-12 champions. You're not putting in a 2-loss Oregon or a 1-loss Alabama. You're not putting those teams in above an undefeated conference champion. So this is where it comes down to, hey, you're appropriately ranked 3rd. Now you have to just prove it, unfortunately, one more time on the field.
And now, the assumption is, of course, that the College Football Playoff Committee will follow suit on Tuesday. Of course, you can stay tuned right here on Locked On Huskies for all those updates as we do talk about all those sort of things. But you're right, because you can't kind of set that precedent and then just move things around. And Washington, I know we've kind of discussed it where, against ranked opponents where they didn't blow anybody out. They didn't blow out USC. They didn't blow out Utah or Oregon State for that matter. And it's a little bit of a different discussion when it happens against a team like Washington State. But the only thing that matters at the end of the day is that they won the game. Like somebody asked Rome Odunze after the game, are you guys concerned with style points at all? And he said, no, that really doesn't matter, because getting the win is really all that does matter at the end of the day. And this team has done that 12 straight times in the regular season. If you want to go back to last year, that's 19 times in a row now that Washington has found a way to get a victory. And yeah, Oregon has put up a lot of gaudy numbers against whoever was in their way. But this Washington team has proved to be a different test for them at multiple different times now. So really all that matters is just winning again. And it's not going to be easy. It's definitely not, but it's just a really good sign to see that Washington is getting the respect they deserve despite not, playing their best game here. Yeah.
And I mean, that's the thing. Cause not that Rome is wrong, but style points matter for a team like Oregon. That's why because they've blown out everyone's like, hey, Oregon might be the hottest team in the country, but they're still number 6 because they have that 1 loss, right? So it's like, hey, Oregon, if they beat Washington again, they could jump 3 spots, right? Like that's sure. So that's what, but the most important stat of all that is the win. So the fact that Washington's won all their games, style points don't need to matter to them. You could win every game from here on out by 2 points or 1 point or field goal every time. your national champion. It doesn't, nobody's going to say, hey, well, they barely squeaked that one out against Georgia. It's like, right. If the roles were reversed, you would say Georgia edges past Washington, Georgia, escapes or, does whatever. It's like, it's still a win for whichever team at the end of the day. Like that's all that truly matters. I mean, same thing. And that's the same discussion we had last season where when they lost to UCLA and they lost to Arizona State, it's like, yeah, hey, Washington's playing great at the end. They're playing great. They're one of the hotter teams in the country. They beat Texas in basically Texas's backyard, but you have the 2 losses. That's why Michael Penix couldn't make the Heisman. And almost, I mean, with one extra loss, somehow Jaden Daniels is going to coast into the Heisman discussion. So it's a little perplexing on that respect. But again, Washington's done everything they needed to do. Now it's just the unfortunate part for Washington, and it's not necessarily unfortunate, right? Because, okay, well, if you took out the conference championship, Washington would be the conference champion, right? But it's almost like, well, okay, well, now you're going to have a week off and you're 12-0. I almost actually think it's kind of better for Washington that they would have this extra chance to beat Oregon, no matter how it looks. Because, like, hey, we beat Oregon twice in the same year. It's like Alabama beating Georgia twice, LSU twice in the same year, right? Like, these schools playing interconference and then doing it once in the regular season and then 2 or 3 months later in the championship game. That's a big – that could get Washington up to 2, and then you're the home team for the Rose Bowl, right?
I agree, yeah.
There's certain factors which, like, hey, and Kalen DeBoer would agree, right? Where it's like, well, hey, those small details matter. You're the home team. You get to choose X, Y, and Z, and – there's small. I mean, Washington was the home team against Texas.
Yep.
Despite literally being Texas's backyard.
No, you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more there. Where this is also just kind of, it's something I wrote about on Inside the Huskies in terms of the pass rush, which is something we're also going to talk about later on in the show, where Washington, they just need to find a way to get their mojo back. And it's something we've discussed all season long, that this team has stepped up to the moment time and time again when they've needed to, especially when they're playing some of the better teams. Like we saw it in that first matchup against Oregon. We saw it at USC, against Utah, against Oregon State. When this team has needed to make a play, when they need to find a way to get something done, they've done it every single time. I remember you asked me at one point on the sidelines yesterday, do you think that they can really find a way to score here? I told you, said, yeah, they've done it all year. Like there's no reason, no matter how bad things have looked at certain points, that you can count this team out. You just can't do that. And I mean, sports books are doing that where there's some that have it as many as opening as high as a 9.5 point favorites for Oregon, which I'm sure we're going to get some great comments from, especially Jamarcus Shepard, about that later on in the week. But you just can't count this team out. And because every single time that's happened, the Huskies have found a way. And that's a huge credit to the coaching staff, honestly. I know that's something else we harp on the show all the time, but the coaching staff does such a good job week in and week out of getting these guys prepared for anything and everything that might be in their way. And this team is just so mentally tough that they find new ways to win every single week. And that should count for something.
Oh no, it absolutely does. And I mean, like that's kind of the, every Oregon fan and every LSU fan and somebody else trying to knock Washington was like, well, they've barely beaten these teams. It's like, right. But wouldn't you rather say the exact same thing about if your team is in the same situation? You're like, yeah, but we still won our games, right? It's not, and again, I think the discussion about the officiating in these games kind of has to go away because it's like, look, did Washington not get a few calls? Sure, probably. Did Wazir certainly not get a few calls? Absolutely. I mean, the amount of selling Washington had to do to get their holding calls, it's like, so Wazir should have sold their holds better. I don't know. But like, there's just so many things to where, yeah, you can go to the Arizona State, all these things. Like, yeah, but this team, even without those, and even actually in spite of those, right? They're one of the top most penalized teams in the country. Despite that, right? They're still here, ready to play for a Pac-12 championship in the second year under Kalen DeBoer with almost the exact same roster that was on this team in 21 that won 4 games.
No, you're absolutely right there. And Before we move on, because we've got some recruiting to talk about. There were some very notable visitors on campus in an unofficial capacity this past weekend for the Apple Cup. But before we do that, we're going to take a second here and talk about our friends over at Game Time. Because if you're trying to find a way down to the Pac-12 Championship Game in Las Vegas, you shouldn't be stressed when you're doing that. And Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. One of the best ways that they do that is with the views from every single seat in the venue, so you know exactly what the view from your seat is going to look like before you buy. Their lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, all sorts of different things to make sure that you're getting a great deal, because Game Time is obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. They have deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats with zone deals. You pick the section, and Game Time picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. And with the Game Time guarantee, it means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you with 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And as you know, whenever we talk about recruiting, we got to give a shout out to our friends over at LinkedIn as well, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Just like, I know I talk about it a lot, but just like Texas A&M, where you don't just want to throw the biggest bag out and see what happens. You got to actually vet some of these candidates. The best way to do it. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Whew, that was a lot of talking right there. But time to get on to recruiting. Lars, do you want to take us through some of the visitors that we saw this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was actually intentional on your part, no offense, but I think there's a great segue mentioning Texas A&M because I don't know if you just saw, but it looks like they're going to hire Mike Elko.
Yeah, Duke. That's been a whirlwind of 24 hours between going from Mark Stoops to Mike Elko. A lot going on there.
I mean, I will say, I in fairness to Elko, he kind of was the early candidate that a lot of people mentioned. So it was a little surprising to see Stoops get those connections the last 24 hours. But then Texas A&M fans pulled to Tennessee and said, "Hang on, timeout. We don't want Stoops. No. Go back to Kentucky. It's fine." And it sounds like they landed on Mike Elko, Duke's head coach, which currently have a commit from 4-star safety Paul Mencke Jr. Is that correct? Right? Am I pronouncing that last name?
I thought it was Mencke, but
Mencke, Paul Mencke Jr. There's always one or two letters that I get mixed up in every name, I swear. But Mencke was on an unofficial visit to Washington for the Apple Cup. He from the state of Washington, not originally, then moved to Texas, and has lived there ever since. But he has family in the state of Washington, so he kind of came up, brought a couple family members to the game. So his parents weren't there. So it wasn't like a big, hey, we're thinking of flipping, this coming week. It's like, no, what this was for Paul was the same thing coaches do a lot where, hey, I'm potentially looking at these other jobs, but I'm still, fully committed to where I'm at right now. And, I'm doing my job as Duke's head coach, but I'd be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to check this place out. And if it works out that I have family here, so be it. And that's the case with Paul. Washington actually scheduled him for an official visit back in June for that big one of the June visit. I don't know if it was the 23rd that he was supposed to come up. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know it was one of the last 2 weekends in June.
He was definitely slated for some point during that week.
Right. And so he ended up not coming on that visit and committing to Duke, which I remember, and I had spoken to him before after he set those June visits as he was taking trips to Notre Dame, and it kind of always seemed like Duke had a little special relationship that Washington and Chuck Morrell, who was his main recruiter at Washington, didn't have. Right, he been to Duke a couple of times. Washington was actually the only school he hadn't visited prior to yesterday. So now that Paul comes up on an unofficial, he still now has the opportunity to take an official visit if he decides to decommit from Duke. And the other part of that is he hasn't heard a ton from Washington because Washington's kind of done for the most part defensively. But there are some things, and again, now that we're at this point in the season, there's always attrition. There's always players transferring out for a number of different reasons, right? Whether it's, and the safety position has kind of been a rotating door of players, at both positions, honestly, due to injuries and other reasons. So I think Washington's kind of keeping their eye on him. Obviously, they like safeties from the state of Texas. It wouldn't be their first pull from the state of Texas, but it's not set in stone. It's like, hey, he's absolutely going to flip. This is a guarantee. But it did certainly open up his eyes to, hey, I certainly wouldn't be opposed to coming back for an official if Elko leaves Duke, which now it sounds like he is. And, maybe he doesn't bring me to Texas A&M. Maybe I look at Texas A&M, but I'm either way backing off my commitment to Duke. And for the most part, Washington's been the only other school that he's heard from that he's considering at this point.
Yeah, and that's going to be an interesting thing, especially when you talk about attrition and how that might work out with the safety position in general. Because I mean, it's fair to just kind of put it out there in the open because everybody knows that we're talking about the Vince Nunley scenario where we don't know necessarily how that's going to work out. And if there's an extra scholarship spot available, Mencke would be a great take to have there. Just a big, lanky kid who can cover really well, come downhill when you need him to. He's a really talented player, but there was one other big one, and that's Calabasas receiver Aaron Butler, who's top 50, top 60 player in the nation, according to 247 Sports. He was also up on an unofficial visit this weekend. And that one is really, really intriguing when we kind of just look at the scenario of where it is as a whole, where, he's committed to Colorado right now. They're having some problems on the offensive side of the ball, to say the least, especially when we look at just kind of how that worked out over the last month or so of the season. And that's one where he came up with his mom. It appeared on Saturdays. I feel like there's a whole lot to talk about with him as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the exact same situation you have at safety that you have at wide receiver, right? Where at this point in the 2024 class, Washington's done recruiting at that position. The only time that you consider doing it is if there's mutual interest on some level, right? Not doesn't have to be high interest because again, as we said, it's an unofficial visit. So this means the family paid their own way, and part of that, much like Paul, where Aaron Butler scheduled an official visit back in January for like June or something like that to Washington.
He was originally going to be the part of that big visit weekend as well.
And that was the first official visit that he set when he started setting those dates way, way back at the beginning of the year. And then, things kind of transpired. Dion, emerges and the rest is history, right? At least for the time. And you can't blame a kid for, seeing that and be like, hey, why not? Let me at least put my name, because it's not an ink, right? It's a commitment, is just a verbal word, right? There's nothing binding him to the Colorado, legally, right? There's no legal bind, right? He hasn't signed an LOI or LOI. So but with bringing it back to Washington, so as Washington's gotten done what they've done this season, the doors have kind of opened for, we knew coming into the season, Rome Odunze was likely gone. We thought Jalen McMillan would be likely gone, and potentially Jalen Polk and Giles Jackson. So there's potentially 4 openings, right? Washington has 2 commits, Jason Robinson Jr. and Justice Williams. So you knew kind of the 4, 2 were safe bets, Rome, and then one of the other 3, right? Where if Giles played all this year and wasn't, because he missed a decent portion of the season due to a hand injury, or a upper body injury, I guess. If I'm
they were very clear that it was a thumb injury. Shout out to Ryan Grubb, who is always blunt about injuries. Yeah,
thumb, right? But because I didn't know, like, if someone's hand was, hey, it was your thumb, it's a pointer finger. It's like whatever. But Giles didn't play as many games as he was initially planning to, so now they've kind of determined, hey, we're going to hold him actually for next year, right? Because we want to do everything. And I mean, the coaches have said on multiple occasions, we want to do everything in our power to preserve that next year for him, unless we absolutely have to play him this year, because then he would be out of eligibility next year. Jalen Polk could also go to the NFL, but man, after the last couple of weeks, has his stock diminished? Who knows? He certainly still, based on production, could go and talent, and he's been in college for 4 years, so it wouldn't be his fault for going. And then you have Jalen McMillan, right? So there's a number. So for sure Rome's gone. And then probably somebody else as well, right? Now the question is it 2 or is it 3? That's the only other way that Washington would be able to find, or right, you could have attrition the other way, right? Where, I mean, I doubt, Jeremy transfers, I doubt Denzel transfers. Maybe one of the freshmen want to, try something else and had a relationship with the coach that gets hired somewhere else, and hey, I can play right away next year. Like there's always things that kind of can play out, but for the most part, you're still looking at, well, hey, this is a potential opportunity that could open, but the door's not open right now. So there's still room to maneuver that's why it was an unofficial, because you're not going to take an official visit to a school before you know that you can go to the school. But you would be remiss if you didn't take the opportunity, to go to a game and see what it's like, right? That's basically all it is, right? It's not Aaron Butler saying, hey, I'm definitely going to Washington, I'm decommitting from Colorado. It's like, no, I'm just taking the trip that I said I would take 6 months ago, and I'm just taking it for free on my own.
It's still it's very interesting to see that because that does feel like a position where you might need one more guy if the scholarship spot opens up, because that's the most important thing to keep in mind here, where if that scholarship spot opens up, whether it be, both Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk decide that they're off to the NFL, that would just be the biggest thing to keep an eye on in that particular scenario. It's always great when we get to talk about recruiting on here, because we've gotten a lot of questions in the comments just saying, hey, can you guys do more of that? So we definitely will, especially as the transfer portal starts to heat up. There's going to be a whole lot more recruiting, just news to talk about on this show. But we're going to switch gears here, and we're going to talk about the pass rush, because Lars, I have a feeling that might be just one of the biggest keys to the game against Oregon, is if they can get pressure on that very talented offensive line. But first, we're going to take a minute here and shout out our good friends over at FanDuel, because as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. Washington is also 9.5-point underdogs in the Pac-12 Championship on FanDuel right now, or at least that's what they opened at. I don't know if the line has changed at all there. Lars, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's going to be something that, the way these last two games has gone, I would definitely take that Husky plus 9.5 at the very least. And hey, speaking of $5 winning money line bets, maybe that's where you want to put some money. Just going to throw that out there. All right, moving on to the pass rush. Lars, you and I were talking about this a little bit off air. One guy that has really stood out this season, outside of Bralen Trice, who just gets pressure or held on every single play, it feels like, is Jacob Lane. And the true freshman he's played a lot over the last couple of weeks. And when Washington just really seems like they want to get, it's not that they want to get a push up front, but when they want to create some problems, they turn to Jacob Lane, who's a true freshman from Puyallup, 6'5", 250 pounds, and they line him up at the 3 technique defensive tackle. And the alignment for a lot of these like obvious passing downs has been Trice and Zion Tupuola-Fatui on the outside, and then Jacob Lane and Voit Tanufi on the inside. And it feels like we're going to see a lot more of that against Oregon, and it's going to be a very different challenge against their offensive line. But I was really impressed with the way the pass rush was able to get after Cam Warren on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other one for me, like you said, would be Voit Tanufi. I think that was kind of a pleasant surprise. I mean, we knew that he's kind of got the ability to, but at his size, he's not necessarily he doesn't have Jacob like size, right? We're at 6'5".
Right.
Boys around 6 foot,
6'1", 6'2".
6'1", 6'2" there, but kind of almost plays, not, this is an insult to him, plays lower, and you want a lower pad level to a degree.
Oh, absolutely.
But you don't also want to be kind of too short to where you can't, move the pocket. So it's interesting. And Chuck Morrell, I will say that is kind of one thing Washington has done throughout his tenure is mix up the front four. I mean, there were times, you had a number of rotation guys. You had Fatui and Javon Parker at times. You had Voy at times. Truly, I don't think we saw him at all.
He was out there.
No, he was. No, sorry about misspeaking here because I'm looking at the PFF side. He was out there for 5 snaps though.
So, but because I know you because you're correct in just kind of in that assumption because I remember saying that to you at some point when we were sitting in the press box. I remember saying, "Where's Tooley? We haven't really seen him," and I don't think that was a product of an injury, more as it was a product of just Washington State's game plan. They love to throw the ball as much as possible, and all due respect to Tooley, he is more served in this defense as a run stuffing defensive tackle. That's what they need him for, and keeping him fresh just for those snaps seems like it's way more important than it is to have him out there trying to, as Chuck Morrell said, just trying to have him chase down Cam Ward or Bo Nix or whoever else. So I think it's really nice to just kind of have that extra body up there because one of the things that I look at especially when I see what Jacob Lane and Voy Tanufi can do from the interior is they're so much faster. And they have that ability to kind of, we saw Jacob Bandis trying to chase down Caleb Williams, right? Where that didn't necessarily go very well for him, just to be blunt, even though, hey, shout out to him and got a big shout out to Pat McAfee from for his effort on that play. But when we see guys like Voy and Jacob Lane in there, they provide that extra speed to not let the quarterback get to the sideline and pick up 5 or 6 yards on a carry. And I think that that's something that could be really, really key in just not letting Bo Nix in the Pac-12 Championship Game carry the ball and just extend drives with his legs.
Certainly. And I mean, I think it's kind of, I feel like Eric Schmidt's kind of the not unclung hero of the staff, but I mean, when you look at we kind of give flack to the defense a lot, right? But it almost seems like any edge rusher they put out there seems to have success, right? I mean, maybe nobody's perfect, right? But it just seems like the fact that they're able to throw in Lance and Jacob and even Maurice Himes and a number of guys at various times in the game or even late in the game, it's like, okay, these games are mattering. These guys are getting important reps, but we're not seeing that at other positions. And it's like, okay, well, both kind of need the help. One seems to be getting it. So that's kind of kept Washington afloat defensively. Because if you take away the pass rush, I don't know, I think that was, if you take away those 5 sacks against Cam Ward yesterday, I'm not sure that's the exact same game. Like, there were a few drives in which that put him out of contention for scoring or at least continuing on in the drive. And so if you don't have Bralen Trice and ZTF, at least moving the pocket and doing whatever, it looks a lot different, I think, in this entire season and certainly this past weekend.
No, I couldn't agree more with you there. I was trying to look up one stat that I didn't have offhand because I had to do a little bit more math than I wanted to. But so Cam Ward was sacked 5 times for a loss of 36 yards. And if you take out those, because it's a separate gripe that I have with college stats. But if you take out the yardage that Cam Ward lost to sacks, he on 6 carries picked up 17 rushing yards. And that's something that we haven't seen from Washington's defensive line and front 7 really all season long, is the ability to actually contain mobile quarterbacks. And you can give a huge shout out to the linebackers too. Carson Bruner has been fantastic over these last couple of weeks. Edifone Ulofoshio still having a really, really good year. Raylan Goforth, Drew Fowler, actually walk-on Drew Fowler has been really, really good in spurts too. He's awesome on special teams too. But 6 carries for 19 yards from Cam Ward, who is a really talented, really athletic quarterback. That's huge for this defense. And that's something we haven't seen all season long, because mobile quarterbacks have been able to just kind of do whatever they want against this defense and pick up yardage with their legs. And that's something, as we've seen this kind of more athletic, somebody I talked to calls it the NASCAR package, which is basically what it is. I'm not sure if that's the verbiage that the coaches use for it. So that's why I haven't really used that term as much. But when we see that speed package out there on the field, that's done a really good job of just kind of forcing mobile quarterbacks to make different decisions, which in this Pac-12 championship game is going to be insanely important.
Right, exactly. Because if Bo's able to do what he wants and Oregon's offense doesn't get any type of resistance, that I don't see Washington winning a shootout. Like that's why both games against Oregon the past 2 years have had, not great defense, but timely defense, right? It wasn't pretty. Yep. I mean, Bucky Irving is still going to have, but as long as, that's kind of the ironic part is, like, oh, hey, Washington had, half their negative run plays or whatever. It's like, well, that's also the other team being good, right? You don't want, right. Because again, and that's also in fairness to Washington. It was like, hey, we know they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but yet they are. So how do you continue that, streak of fortune? You have to do just enough, and ideally a little bit more than just enough, right? Because just enough gets you a win. Doing a little bit more, which they're certainly capable of doing. I mean, Edefon Olofosio, Carson Bruner, Alfonso at times. There's a number of guys on this defense. It's just a matter of can they put it all together at the same time the offense is clicking. That's basically been the team's struggle this season. Is when the offense is great, the defense is like, ooh. When the defense is, forcing 3 and outs and getting stops consecutively, or even, on a consistent basis, the offense seems to be struggling. So it's a matter of can Washington put it together for 4 quarters on both sides of the ball. And they certainly have the potential to. It's just a matter of will they.
That's a really good point, and that's something where in a game like this, that's where it's something we've harped on this show all season long, where I would trust Kalen DeBoer to make sure that his guys are ready for a challenge like that, because we've seen it time and time again. No, you have a point, please.
Well, I was gonna say, but exactly, why is the reason Oregon lost against Washington in October? Dan Lanning went for it on 4th and 2. In plus territory and didn't get it. They had the chance to do exactly what Washington did last night, Saturday night against Washington State, and couldn't execute it. Washington did. So when the time, and that's what we said, right? When this time truly matters, right? When you need to make one play, Washington has always on both sides of the ball found a way to make that one play. Mish Powell's pick 6, there's so many things you can say where it's Jabbar's tip, various things, right? You can give up 49 or 50 plays, but if you make the one, it's the end of the game and you win the game. That's all that matters.
Absolutely. I feel like there's no better place to end it there than right there too, because we have so much coming for you this week in a Pac-12 championship week. These next few just weeks of Husky football are going to be an absolute whirlwind. So we really do hope that you stay tuned with us here on Locked On Huskies. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. All the everydayers out there, thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And if you're not subscribed yet, hey, we'd love for you to be. There's so many easy ways to get involved with the show. You can hit us up and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We are there. We are everywhere. We're pumping out new content for you every single day. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode of what we're putting out there. Please make sure you like the video, leave us a 5-star review for audio only. We do try our best to make sure that we put out quality content for you every single day. So please make sure you interact with us in the comments too. We'd love to see that. Ask us any questions you might have. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Tuesday.